Donald Trump, the next president-elect, wants to put a 25% tax on goods coming from Canada and Mexico and an extra 10% tariff on all goods coming from China. This big plan to raise tariffs has caused a huge uproar. China sent a scary message by proposing a 10% tariff on goods from China and a 25% tariff on goods from Mexico and Canada. Trump says he is going after illegal immigration and drug crime, but Beijing told him that a trade war is bad for everyone and said he was lying about the facts. Mexico has helped the Biden administration keep people from crossing the border illegally, and the Mexican government reacted by writing to the president-elect. The Chinese yuan, the Canadian dollar, and the Mexican peso are all falling in value, which is already causing problems on global markets. Experts say prices for everything from cars to electronics could go through the roof. The Mexican government also thinks they have some power in this economic fight that is getting worse. Trump said that he was going to put these taxes into effect on January 20th, his first day in office. He said that he would sign all the papers needed to put a 25% tax on all goods coming into the US from Mexico and Canada. This tax will stay in place until drugs, especially fentanyl, and people coming into the US illegally are stopped. A lot of people think that this is an attempt to start talks in order to get these countries to take on more of the work of patrolling the borders and stopping drug deals. Regarding China, Trump said he would add a 10% tax on top of any other tariffs because he thinks China isn't doing enough to stop fentanyl trade. As soon as Trump made his speech, China's embassy in Washington, D.C., warned that a trade war would be bad for everyone. China thinks that trade and economic partnership with the US is good for both sides, and they strongly denied Trump's claims about fentanyl smuggling. The ambassador explained what Beijing has done to stop the fentanyl trade, such as working with the police on certain cases. In conclusion, the planned taxes have already started to hurt the US economy and have made people worry that the US and China might start a trade war. When Trump announced taxes, there were big problems on markets around the world. For example, the Chinese yuan fell against the US dollar, the Canadian dollar fell, and the Mexican peso fell. These early market responses show that putting these taxes into effect could cause a lot of problems for the economy. Because of how global trade is linked, these kinds of actions can have big effects that go beyond the countries they are meant to affect. They can have an effect on global supply lines and financial markets as well. Economic experts warn of possible long-term effects, such as disruptions in global supply lines, higher prices for consumers and businesses, and possible retaliation from countries that are affected. There could be a big effect on trade between the US and China, since taxes apply to 66.4% of US imports from China and 58.3% of Chinese imports from the US. Trump's plan to add an extra 10% tax would put even more pressure on this relationship, which could lead to less trade and higher prices for both companies and customers. Both Mexico and Canada, which trade a lot with the US, have reacted to Trump's tax threat. President Claudia Sheinbaum of Mexico said that taxes were not fair and were not a good way to deal with issues like drug use and immigration. In a message to Trump, she plans to suggest that they talk and tell him that retaliation taxes could hurt small businesses. Canada, which is the US's biggest export market and a key source of energy raw materials and made goods, is also worried about how Trump's planned taxes might affect their business. Canadian provincial leaders are worried about how the taxes might affect workers and jobs in both Canada and the US. Doug Ford, the Premier of Ontario, which has the most people, said that it would be terrible for workers and jobs in both countries. Trump's trade policy was hostile and protective, especially towards China. He put high taxes on goods from China worth hundreds of billions of dollars. The trade disagreement had a big effect on the economies of both countries. It messed up global supply lines and made things more expensive for businesses and customers. The Biden administration, on the other hand, has mostly kept Trump's China taxes in place while adding some of its own. Biden's method has been less hostile and more focused on working with other countries. Economists and political scientists have different ideas about what might happen with Trump's planned taxes. Some people say that Trump's fear of tariffs could be a way to get people to agree to his terms, similar to how he threatened and then agreed to terms during his first term. Others say that the taxes will have very bad effects on the economy if they are put in place. A senior assistant at the Center for Strategic and International Studies named William Rich says that Trump's social threats might just be empty words. He also points out that Trump's first term was marked by a bold and protectionist trade plan that went after China, Mexico, Canada, and Europe. There are also concerns about the future of international trade deals and groups, like the World Trade Organization, WTO, because of the planned taxes. The rules-based system of international trade that has been in place since the end of World War II could be weakened if big economies like the US put in place their own tariffs. Tariffs have both fans and critics. Those who support them say they give countries more power in talks on a wide range of issues, while those who disagree say they are blunt tools that can have unexpected economic effects. When China tried to fight back against the US, it had trouble because local demand and jobs were low. Global supply lines are becoming more and more linked, which has complicated effects on the industrial, farming, and agriculture sectors around the world. As the inauguration date of January 20th gets closer, everyone will be watching Washington and Beijing to see how this high-stakes economic drama plays out. Some businesses, like the car industry, which depends a lot on linked North American supply lines, could also be greatly affected by the suggested taxes. After Trump's announcement, the stock prices of Japanese car companies like Nissan and Toyota that have a lot of factories in Mexico went down. There could also be big changes in the energy sector, since Canada is a big source of oil and power for the US. In the coming weeks and months, there will likely be a lot of political action as countries try to figure out how to handle this tough situation.